Hello everyone, today I am going to talk about the Russian Mayak satellite. I probably pronounced that completely wrong, and as you might have been able to tell by the title, I will kind of mix this with a rant about news reporting and common scientific understanding, but I will also explain what the Mayak is and what the plan behind it was, and the recent news that it failed to deploy its reflector sail. Now, the Mayak as such is a kind of interesting little research project, a Cubesat built by a Russian university-supported group. The Cubesat was launched together with the Canopus satellite and the Flying Laptop satellite on a Soyuz rocket a while ago, and it was supposed to deploy a big sail uh, several meters in size that would serve as a reflector and as an aerodynamic sail. And it has several purposes. One is to slowly aerodynamically deorbit the satellite, since at that altitude there is still a little bit of atmosphere left. It's very very thin, but it's still enough to deorbit a small CubeSat over a long period of time, given a large enough thin sail. And this kind of deorbiting technology should be further researched and tested on the Mayak to later be potentially applied on other satellites. Another reason was to study the reflected light of the reflector in order to learn more about the upper atmosphere. And then, of course, there is the most well-known reason, that is the reflected light would make the satellite very well visible and thus have a kind of publicity impact. The satellite was launched into a sun-synchronous orbit, that is a polar orbit, a not really low Earth orbit, but a relatively low Earth orbit, still within the most upper layers of the atmosphere, where you still have a few atoms left that would slowly decelerate the satellite. And it's a polar orbit designed to be synchronous with the sun, in that the tidal forces of the Earth would shift the inclination of the orbital plane in a way that it would always be inclined in the same way relative to the sun. So once a year the orbital plane would be turned around the north-south axis, so that the orbit itself would always be, it's a polar orbit, it would always be from the North Pole to the South Pole, and then back from the South Pole to the North Pole, and it would always be over the day side or over the night side, and never be over the evening side, for example. So it is actually not visible from the equator, it is visible from anywhere somewhat north and somewhat south of the equator, since you need the satellite's horizon or footprint to extend into the sunlit area, so the satellite is still illuminated by the sun, while you yourself would be on the night side of the planet, so you can see the satellite with a good contrast. Now this means that the satellite can't be seen from everywhere, and it can only be seen 1 or 2 times a day for rather short time. And while it was supposed to be very bright, it wouldn't be that bright. Now, once it was announced that the satellite was supposed to be the brightest object in the night sky aside from the moon, a lot of rather uninformed media hype started. Many sites claiming that it would be the end of astronomy because soon the night sky would be completely illuminated and you couldn't see anything, or that it was some over ambitious, purely show off project. Of course, they never did the research to actually learn that the satellite had other purposes than just be visible, and of course they never actually looked at what kind of orbital path the satellite was on, or how bright it would actually be, because of course it wouldn't illuminate the night sky like any satellite. It would just be a dot in the sky. It would just be a slightly brighter dot in the sky. The calculations, the published calculations for the brightness of the Mayak were also a bit optimistic. So while they claim to be a little bit brighter than the ISS, it would have probably been a little bit dimmer than the ISS one way or another. It would have been kind of comparable to the ISS, which didn't end astronomy, and it would have been visible from a smaller percentage of the Earth's surface and for a much shorter time. And the general uninformed, unresearched media outrage about this. I mean, it's always kind of upsetting when general media reports about spaceflight without doing any research or even reading half a Wikipedia page, because they just want to pick up on some headline they read and then use their elementary school level half knowledge to put this into the most clickbaity headline they can for their own site. But this time, actually, even some pages dedicated to science or spaceflight also kind of overhyped the whole thing to the point where it was even called controversial, as in it would supposedly hinder astronomy. Whereas I just found the project as such interesting, and I did try to spot Mayak in the night sky a few times now, and so did others, and weirdly it didn't really turn up as bright as it should, even with a more pessimistic calculation of brightness. And now it was actually officially stated that the deployment of the sail had failed. The satellite itself is in orbit as planned, and actually a few people with proper telescopes managed to spot it, though it just looked like a very dim little point, like most satellites when you manage to see them. Of course, there are a lot of fake videos out there as well that also have no idea what they're doing and Photoshop a gigantic triangle there and claim that's the Mayak, and it looks like it's flying like 10 meters over their head. Uh, but there are a few actual serious spottings, and they confirm that the satellite as such seems okay, but the sail didn't deploy, which is of course a bit upsetting. Now there have been no statements as to if there will be a successor or a second attempt, or if the project itself would be seen as failed. I found the idea to be rather interesting, and hopefully other teams will keep researching it. And unfortunately, the team itself can't do anything more than watch the satellite either, since the satellite doesn't really have any radio communication on board. It's a very simplistic design, and it was built to deploy the sail at a pre-programmed time, and there's no means of direct communication to the satellite. It should just be observed, and it did have a basic light Morse code system on board, so it would essentially flash LEDs to deliver information about its telemetry over a Morse code, but those haven't been seen yet either. And really, there's no way to send any information up to the satellite, so they can just wait if the satellite does anything, but as per official statement, they apparently expect that this satellite has failed and won't do anything anymore. Now, fortunately, there is a relatively good chance for a possible replacement, as the Mayak was a relatively lightweight small satellite, a small CubeSat, just 4 kilograms in weight, so it doesn't really need its own launcher. It was launched with many other satellites, and a replacement could be launched in tandem with basically any other satellite launch. Although the specific target orbit of the Mayak is not a very often needed target orbit, there is still a good chance that launch opportunities will come up, so there is also a relatively good chance that a replacement could be launched within the near future. Now, I hope this was kind of interesting, and I hope you can now add to discussions about the Mayak, knowing that it was just a research project about deorbiting debris with a little publicity side effect, and that it was not a super expensive or super huge satellite, really just a 4 kilogram CubeSat, one you could basically carry around with you if it was still on Earth, knowing that it would not completely illuminate the sky or be extremely huge, but just be a kind of brightish little dot in the sky, that it was that would be visible only for a few minutes a day from certain locations. And while the project as such is kind of interesting, the giant media hype is just stupid and unnecessary. Now, I hope this was kind of interesting, and thanks for watching.